Hello, and welcome to the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. I'm John Knotts, and we're here at the beautiful Metro East Community Media Studios in Gresham, Oregon. I like to call it the gateway to the Columbia Gorge, but I think Fairview and Troutdale would argue with me, but suffice it to say we're close enough. It's the 8th of May, the year 2016, a Sunday, and for you people watching, the thought just occurred to me, it is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there in what I call TV land. We have a veteran with us today because that's what our program is all about. We introduce a veteran and we just sit here and chat. And for your enjoyment today, I have a Mr. Gene King with me. And we're going to do a little chatting here about where he came from and how he ended up in the military and those things he's done since he got out of the military. Mr. King, Gene, if I may.
Yes, you will.
Pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
And it's a Sunday, so I hope we didn't pull you out of church.
No, church is over, so I went there and I'm here now.
And where do you go to church, by the way?
Good Shepherd Community out in Boring.
I'm very familiar with Good Shepherd.
Yeah.
And now that you brought that up, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
On the 27th, I believe, coming up here in May, Mr. Steve Bates, out in your area, they're having a special commemorative celebration for the Wright family.
Highway.
And they're going to dedicate a portion of Highway 26 to Mr. George Wright and Mr. Jim Wright.
They lost both of them in the Second World War. No, in Vietnam.
In Vietnam.
That's right, yes.
George was 1967 Marine Corps.
Uh-huh.
His brother was 1969. And
he was Army, I believe, wasn't he?
He was Army medic.
He was Army, yep. Uh-huh.
I went to high school with both of them and played baseball with both of them.
Oh, so it's a personal thing then, yeah.
So I'm glad to see that after all of these years,
some acknowledgement, yes.
An acknowledgement to the family, because many of the folks watching may be unaware that the Wright family from Boring, Oregon, was only one of 41 families that lost 2 or more sons in Vietnam during that conflict.
In the whole country.
In the whole country, 41 families.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until recently, and recently, I don't know if recently is weeks or months or just within the last year or so, that the community of Boring, where you live, even knew about the Wright family and the fact that they lost 2 sons. So being a tight-knit community as we are, it's quite a blessing to see them recognized, because we lost 6 young men from Gresham High School.
Right.
And they finally got plaques up on them about 5 years ago.
Right.
So it's nice to hear you go to Good Shepherd, and I know they do a lot for veterans.
Yeah, they do.
And a lot of activities, and God bless the Wright family, because that's coming up on May 27th. Department of Transportation is going to put their signs up in recognition for George and Jim Wright. So I'm glad we got into that part of it. That's why I like to do things unexpectedly.
That's right. You never know what's coming up, right?
It's always better to do things unexpectedly, because I didn't know you'd go to the Good Shepherd Church, and it happened to be a good time to mention the
their
Wright
patriotic
family.
Service is really great.
It's fabulous.
Oh, you've been to it? Okay.
Fabulous. I was there when John McCain, not John McCain, but Colonel, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yep. No. It was in the Pentagon, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I lost the name too, so. But I like the color guard. I like the whole thing. It's just acknowledging how much we owe our country.
They do a great job.
Yeah.
So let me get back to you for a minute, or maybe 30 minutes.
Okay.
Or 40 minutes.
Whatever.
Where were you born?
I was born at home in a little town called New Albany, Ohio.
Oh boy, Midwest.
It was a farm community. Matter of fact, in going to school there, it was well, let's put it this way. If what we did in grade school there were done today, you'd be suspended. We had so much fun. I mean, we got out at noon and we built sod huts and all sorts of things, because it was a farm community and everybody was used to the soil. So from about the 15th of April through about the 15th of May, depending on the weather, you could depend on anywhere from 30 to 50% of the kids coming with no shoes. Because they were reserved for something better.
Well, having been born in Anderson, Indiana.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good town.
Neighbors to where you were born.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I had a grandfather that worked in the unions Teachers Federation in Indianapolis after World War I, unions in Ohio and Akron, Columbus, and United Auto Workers. So I'm somewhat familiar with Ohio from that standpoint. It's interesting that we're both from the Midwest. I'm called a Hoosier, and I have not figured out what a Hoosier is yet, except a race tire.
That's right.
Now, what are you called if you're
I'm a
from?
Buckeye.
That's right. That's right. I wanted you to say that.
It's a useless nut.
You knew I. I hope you don't consider yourself a useless
No,
nut.
but that's what basically it is. They don't, only the squirrels eat them, I think.
I can see this is going to be a great interview because you're like me. Just throw it out there. So you came out of Ohio, and I came out of Indiana, and I know farmland and what we did in school, and I agree with you. Things have changed a lot.
Well, my favorite subject, especially in high school, was agriculture. I was an FFA man all the time.
Yes.
My VOAG class was probably, I learned more in the VOAG class than I did all the other classes in high school.
I wish, well, as times have changed, I wish young people could experience more of that.
Well, they brought math or language or anything into the VOAG situation, because when you're figuring gestation periods and if you're working on it on automobiles or something, metric versus SAE and this type of thing, a lot of things that you take in a math class or other classes come into being, only they become in practicum. You have to use them in a way.
In practicum. Remember that.
But the point is that when you're using it, then it becomes personal. And so you learn a little bit more than you do, because I can remember some of the history classes I was in, they were talking away about history, and my mind was 5,000 miles away.
Well, we did a lot of daydreaming. We had that privilege to daydream,
Yes.
enjoy school, and every day was a real experience. I know for me, it must have been for you, exciting to be with your friends, and when winter came, to play in the snow. I loved all of that, and of course I think Ohio was Indiana. Didn't we have 4 seasons?
Yes, we definitely
We
had 4
actually
seasons.
had 4
that's
seasons.
Right. And you never knew quite where they were, because they'd back up on each other.
They would.
Get a few good days, and you go, oh, summer's here, then boom, you get hit with the cold weather again.
Well, it's kind of like Oregon.
That's right, especially this year.
Yeah, we have 2 seasons, wet and dry.
Yep.
And we're not sure how much of the wet's going to overtake the dry. So, kind of interesting, but I enjoyed Indiana. I haven't been there for a long, long time.
Well, people don't realize that Indiana is the motor capital of the United States.
And you know what? I'm glad that you just said that.
I mean, people think, oh, it's Detroit. Well, Detroit was much later than that. They had, what, 5 or 6 automobile companies in Indiana or something like that? That's when you have the 500 there. They all came there to test them against each other.
You're a very intelligent individual.
No.
Because not too many people know that. That's the reason for the track in Indianapolis.
Right.
There were automobiles, 50, 100 automobile manufacturers in the early 1900s.
Right.
The hub was Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. You're going to find this interesting, because I do things when I feel like doing them. I actually called Donald Trump's campaign office when he was in Indiana and left a message that as long as they're talking about economics and the loss of employment in Indiana, having been from Indiana and familiar with Kokomo and Elwood and Anderson, where I was born, Delco Remy,
Yep.
Guide Lamp, General Motors provided income for generation after generation in the town I was born in.
And not to mention Gary, the steel capital of that area.
We spent 2 years in Valparaiso, Indiana, in a trailer park, and you mentioned Gary, Indiana. I'm having a ball talking to you right now, because Gary, Indiana, and East Chicago.
That's right.
Steel town.
That was exactly it. Matter of fact, after I went through school, I went to college in Canton, and I got a job with United Airlines. And of course, it was early 60s, so it was still the days of the Piston. Jets were just coming in, and we had a DC-6 takeoff, and it was a slushy runway, you know. And as he got up, before he could get the gear retracted, it froze. And so he was a seasoned pilot, so he knew what to do. So he got permission. He went over to Gary, Indiana, dropped to 500 feet over the steel mills, and circled until it heated up, and he rotated his gear a couple times and went on to Chicago.
That's
There's
interesting.
that much heat coming up from the steel mills there.
Oh,
he
yeah.
knew it was there, and so
Oh yeah, Gary. Oh, this is great. Gary, Anderson, the whole area, the automobile hub, and where have all of those jobs gone?
I don't know, but Gary is really depressed now. That area is really depressed.
Well, I saw Gary on television the other day, and it is depressing to see what's happened in those areas. And somebody's going to have to come up with a solution. I know Chrysler was going to reopen just outside of Indianapolis. Nestle's was talking about going into that area. There were a lot of hopes of these folks, you know, regaining employment and looking and seeing a future, and none of this stuff ever came to fruition.
Right.
So when you look at Indiana, and I can't speak for Ohio, it's not in real good shape from what I've seen.
Well, I went to school in Canton, the Malone College where I went to school, and there was Pittsburgh Plate Glass, U.S. Steel, Timken Roller Bearing, and in Akron, of course, there were Goodyear, Goodrich, Firestone. All these now basically have outsourced.
Are you listening?
Most
Yes.
most of the tires now come from Japan or somewhere in the Orient.
That's right.
They don't manufacture tires here to speak of at all.
And you
anymore.
mentioned Timken
Timken,
bearings.
yeah.
The industry that was in just those two states alone was phenomenal. Where did all of this go? Where is it?
Yeah.
Outsourced.
That's right.
Cheap labor. That's going to have to change. That's an important issue on the horizon now.
I think it is too, and one of the things we're going to have to realize is that we have been dependent on petro energy for so many years, and we're going to continue. I hear a lot of rhetoric about, oh, we're going to go to solar and everything else, and we can, but not to the degree that we're anticipating.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to have to harness what we can with petrol and use it in these areas. And as such, because of that, we may not have the lifestyle quite as good as we've had in our lifetime. I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
So do I. I would like to have, I know my children are grown up and have their own families.
Yeah.
The grandchildren, I have my first great-grandson. I just wish they could experience what we have been able to experience in this free land, with the opportunities to think on our own, to grow on our own. I know we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
Let me get back to you. You graduated from high school where?
In Delaware, it was Delaware Willis High School.
Delaware Willis High School. And did you go to college?
Well, that's kind of interesting because, you know, I tell you, agriculture is my favorite. So when I graduated from high school, I had 32 head of purebred hogs. And I love Yorks. Had a good time. I wanted to be a hog farmer the rest of my life. Well, my mother says, I think you need to go to college. I don't want to go to college. Well, I think you ought to go. Okay, well, and so I sold my hogs and went to Malone College. And here again, I was told I was a farmer, so I was not an academic. So my first year in college was pleasurable, let's put it that way. It wasn't academic.
First year usually is pleasurable.
Well, there was a kind of conservative college, and so the dorm we were living in had, you know, proctors and this type of thing governed. And so at the end of the year, if you had more than 50 demerits, you were ousted. Well, at the end of the first semester, I had 39 already. Only they were running into a problem with not enough space for the new kids coming in. So they said, who wants to volunteer to stay down at the YMCA? So I volunteered.
And this was where?
It was called Malone College in Canton, Ohio.
Canton, Ohio.
Yeah.
My gosh, what else is in Canton?
A lot of things. A lot of things, that's what I say.
Yeah, how about football?
Oh, that's the Hall of Fame. See, it wasn't even there. Wasn't even there when we were there. Matter of fact, people don't realize out west that, well, in the South, in Texas, and especially the Midwest and Ohio, they're crazy about football. There's a stadium right where the Hall of Fame is now. It's put in by the city of Canton, and they would play Canton McKinley and the Tigers of Massillon, and they'd have 70,000 fans in the stands for a high school football game.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Matter of fact, Timken and all these industries we're talking about, they would have their salesmen go down to West Virginia. And one of them said he'd go down to West Virginia. He found this big husky guy plowing behind a horse or a mule with a plow for getting ready to plant tobacco. And he said, I want to ask him where this certain thing was. He says, he pointed his finger. I says, thank you, son. I appreciate it. But he says he picked up the plow and pointed with the plow. He says, you know, Ken can use you.
It's interesting about the excitement in high school sports, football, and of course Indiana basketball.
Right.
And Mom used to talk about Butler all the time, the Butler Fieldhouse. And,
Right.
And we had a Crispus Attucks High School in Indianapolis that I would refer to as a colored high school. Then, one of the coaches was on news one evening and interviewed and was asked how they pick their basketball players. He said, well, it's real simple. We line all the young men up at White River, and we have them walk across the river. And if they don't submerge themselves and they keep their head out of water, they're tall enough to play. I don't know how true that story is, but I was asked out here a couple of years ago. I was at a high school game in the area I won't mention. And somebody said, why do we have 8 or 9 coaches for a basketball team in high school? And I said, I don't know. You're talking to the wrong person. I was born in Indiana. I'm a Hoosier. And if you ever saw the movie Hoosiers,
Yeah.
all you need is a former military individual who can actually coach the team and get something accomplished. And then you hire the janitor as the assistant coach, and he can do everything else. You only need 2 qualified people to
That's
coach
right.
a high school basketball
Yep,
team.
that's right.
And I'm not sure they thought that was humorous. But so you went to college, and you had some interesting experiences. And how many years did you spend in college, or was
Well,
that
I
last?
wrapped up 4 years of college education in 6.
Oh,
I had to work all the way through college because I had no outside income, so I could only take just barely a 12
but that's
hours.
okay.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not grumbling, but that's the way it was, and so I just had to keep going, and so.
Young people worked hard to go to college back then.
Well, I worked at a place called Canton Containers. They made plastic bags. Every time I see plastic bags, I know where they came from. And it was $1.25 an hour, and we'd sit behind these machines, and they'd wrap, and the bags would fly out, and every 100 you had to grab them and put them in something, put a rubber band in, and package them. Well, it's kind of boring after a while, and so, but that was what we did for a while to do it.
And that was what year?
That would be probably about 61.
1961. The thought occurs to me, $1.25 wasn't a bad hourly wage
No, that was
in 1961.
well, when I was high school, I was always looking for work. I don't know, I think sometimes farm boys like to keep active, so I had a friend that told me about a manufacturer that wanted somebody to mow his yard, so I went over and asked if I could have the job. Oh yeah, I mowed the yard. He said, that's a good job you did. Well, he had a small business making creepers. He says, now you're not legal, you're only 14, but if you want to come in here in the shop, I'll show you something. I'll pay you an hourly wage for doing that. So I made $1 an hour then, helping to make creepers at 14.
I washed cars for $1 an hour and on the weekends, and I'd get, maybe 7, 8 hours a day for Saturday, Sunday, because that's the only time I could work. And I was just happy as I could be
That's
with
right.
with $1 an hour. But then I look at gas prices then.
Yeah. Well,
19 cents a gallon, 21 cents a
going out on a
gallon.
date for $1.25. And I had low on gas because a Model A Ford is what I had. So I stopped, put $0.25 worth of gas in. And then we'd get down to the A&W and we'll get these price will flow 50 cents. I said, that was the evening, folks. We're not doing anything else.
That's right. I got thrown out of a gas station here locally, pulled in with a Renault 4CV, a little French four-door automobile, rear engine, and I drive back and forth to high school. And I pulled in there, and the guy said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I just want 50 cents worth. He said, excuse me? I said, it's 50 cents worth. He said, threw me out of the station. But what was the price per gallon per gas then, you know?
Yeah.
What were hamburgers? What
That's
were
right.
milkshakes?
Yep.
You went out and had a whole big party night for
$1.25.
$1.25, my gosh, you know? Now you go to a movie, it costs you, what, $12, $15.
Something like that, yeah.
Popcorn, who knows what
Yeah.
that is anymore. So you finally finished college, and you're 6 years. You got your degree,
Got a degree.
and then you.
My last job through there was working for United Airlines at the Canton Akron Airport. And so when we got the degree, I also got a teaching certificate, which is kind of unique because the teacher asked me one day when we were having a class, he said, "What did you say after class?" I said, "Oh, I screwed up." And he says, "Okay, well, I come in after class," and he gives me all these accolades about how you keep their attention, how you got them doing all these projects on their own, and it goes on and on and on. He said, "I got one suggestion." I said, "This is it." He said, "It'd be better if you didn't grab him by the neck and shake him like that."
Now, you're how old at this point?
I was 24.
So you're 24.
Yeah.
I'm leading.
Depending on the year. It's in February, so it may have been 20 or 23, maybe.
I'm leading up to something here because you went to work at United Airlines. How long were you at United Airlines?
Well, when I graduated, there were no teaching jobs available. And so I think the Lord wanted us out here because then I thought, well, when I was a kid, my dad went to a school down in Azusa, California, and we spent my second grade down there in a 21-foot house trailer, they called them then, pulled by a 47 Plymouth, with a bumper hitch. And so we went up 101 all the way, and I remember coming up Route 30. And the scenic highway, well, that was Route 30 at the time. I remembered how beautiful it was as a kid. I said, well, let's go out there for a year if the guy transfers. So finally a transfer came through, and that's the way we come out here.
I know trailer living, and as far as I'm concerned, it was the best life. Life was good. We lived in Anderson, and we lived in Valpo, back to Anderson. We were in a trailer park, and I'm telling you, for a young boy, and then subsequently his two siblings, life was good. I didn't think it was
too good at times. I remember we went to Knott's Berry Farm, and that had to be on the 48, 49. Anyway, this trailer park, this kid kept bugging me. Well, we had a little dissertation in the John, and somebody heard about it, and I didn't know it. So we're down at Knott's Berry Farm, and Sad-Eye Joe.
Yeah, oh yeah, yes.
Anyway, I come up to look at Sad-Eye Joe. He says, "Well, Gene, how you doing?" He says, "You got to quit throwing people in the John now like that." And scared me to death. I thought the world knew.
Now, that was what year?
That was 49.
1949.
Yeah.
You were how old then?
I'd have to figure out. I was born in 41, so about 8 years old.
About 8 years old, and you got to. So we have a lot in common. That's why I like to not do pre-interviews with the trailer life and Knott's Berry Farm. And we moved from Indiana to Southern California in '59.
Well, it was different then, wasn't it?
Oh,
we were in Azusa out there, and I had to walk to school, but I had to walk through Orange Grove to get there.
That's all that was, Orange Grove.
Orange Groves and dairy farms.
All dairy farms and Orange Groves. We lived in Chula Vista.
And now you can't find anything there, hardly.
Well, no, it's buried. There used to be a lot of oil derricks.
Yeah.
Still are, but it was all Orange Groves. And Knott's Berry Farm. My last name being Knotts, by the way.
Oh.
Relatives at some level. Very familiar with Knott's Berry Farm. And so we've kind of traveled the same path. Isn't that interesting?
There's another one now.
First time we've ever met. And we
bring up Knox.
Kind of traveled Knox, K-N-O-X. That's not my name.
Oh.
Mine's K-N-O-T-T-S.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So you ended up in Oregon.
Oregon, right. Mm-hmm. I come out in May, and my wife had already found a teaching job while her mother put her through, so she got through in 4 years. And so she was back there teaching. She finished come out in, about the 15th of June. And so I had the day off, and I met her at the airport. I said, I got to show you Timberline Lodge.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so we get in the car and we go to Timberline Lodge, and she was so glad to get out away from the snow of the Midwest. Well, you know what happened at Timberline? We got in a blizzard.
Oh, you visited Timberline?
Went to Timberline Lodge. I'm getting a blizzard. She says, "You brought me out here for this kind of snow."
Yeah, but look, Ohio only has mounds.
That's right.
This is a mountain.
That's right, absolutely.
This is a mountain. Back there, a mole can make a mountain in the Midwest.
We're flatlanders.
Well, sure.
So we had no idea of elevation and snow.
To understand.
And so we thought, there's going to be snow down here. No, it's not at all. Very seldom we get much snow down here.
Trees look like bushes. Go back in the area and say, "How do you like our trees?" Trees? No, you haven't seen trees yet. You haven't
That's
seen
right.
mountains yet.
That's right. Yep.
The closest thing to, the
Well, southern Indiana has a few.
yeah,
Rolling
Mountain
Hills.
State Park, the
Yeah.
Mounds Indians, and that whole history. So now you have ended up in Oregon, and you're how old?
I am now 25.
You're 25 years old. Your wife has come out,
Yep.
and she's a teacher.
Yes.
And she's teaching where?
Well, there was no opening. She put in her application, and we were waiting for, she was a sub with what you could do, and she got a call by, oh shoot, I'm gonna get in trouble now. Who's the fellow that we used to be the district superintendent here of Gresham?
I know a lot of people.
Gordon. Anyway, he called her and says, we had more first graders show up than we know. We need a first grade teacher. Were you willing to try? She says, oh yeah. So immediately she jumped in the third day of school into the first grade.
And that was at which school?
That was at North
At North Gresham.
North Gresham.
Very familiar with
Yep.
it. That's interesting. But you yourself now,
I'm still with United now, see? So
did you transfer with United out here?
transferred United out here. That's where we got out here.
And that was what year?
That was in 65, May of 65 I came out here.
In the travels that we've had, let me tell you something interesting. In 1969, I went to work for Pan American World Airways here in Portland.
I probably saw you there one sooner or later.
Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting how the paths,
Cross.
but now you're coming up 26 years old. Coming up 26 years old. And what happened?
Well, kind of interesting. My draft board was in Ohio. That's
Your
where-
draft board.
Yeah, our draft
Now this is getting interesting.
My
Your draft board, 26 years old.
Was in Ohio, and so I got this notice I had to go in for a physical. So that was in, I got in here somewhere, in 66. So I went in January 66 for a physical and passed the physical, and so I was expecting papers, except in March I had appendicitis. And so the doctor fired something off to the draft board, and of course they put a hold on it. And then I got the announcement that Uncle Sam needed me on January 25th of 67. So on our wedding anniversary, our 5th wedding anniversary, we had our party down at the draft board before I'm shipped off.
So you ended up January 67?
January 67, 25th,
And you went to Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis, yes.
Which is now Joint Base
With
Lewis McChord.
Right.
And we have a picture. We're going to pull a camera in on your 1967 picture, if you could pull that out.
Oh.
We're going to take a peek here because most of the people in the service when I went in were 18, 19. If they were 20 years old, right there on camera 1, that is 1967.
That's me right there.
And that's Gene up there at the age of
26.
26 years old. So you were, I want to hear it in your words, you were the what with the unit at 26? Being married?
I was the old man.
The old man.
I was almost 5 years older than my commanding officer.
You're 5 years older than your commanding
Almost,
officer.
yeah, I was by a few months, I've been 5 years older.
There was 7 or 8 of us walked out of Portland State baseball football team and enlisted in the Marine Corps about May of 66. Went to San Diego October 66. So again, our paths were
Real
pretty
close.
The only thing that wasn't similar was our age, because when we looked at people that were 21 years old, they were the old men. And if they were married, how did they ever get that old?
Yeah.
So somebody your age at 18 or 19, as we were, I would have looked at you like, how did you even live that long?
Well, the thing that's interesting is that we had just bought our farm out in Boring in March of 66. And so I was working my buns off on the farm trying to get it, because it was absolutely a disaster. There were vehicles all around the place in certain ages of being just taken apart, and so they got them out of there. But we had no money because everything we'd saved went to down payment. We were kind of stupid. We just did, instead of a little bit, we put everything we had down, and so we had no furniture, and they had single wall construction with shiplath. If you're familiar with shiplath.
Yes.
Anyway, they had put tar paper over. The tar paper was worn off, and the blackberries were growing through.
And this is your house?
In the house,
This
yeah.
is your house?
Yeah.
So you didn't have to go outside to pick blackberries?
No, the lady before
pick
us,
them right in your restaurant.
that's almost just about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we were putting everything we could into that, and then of course I got the draft notice, and oh Lord, you must have screwed up something here, because I thought, wow, this is terrible. But what was happening is that Lori was teaching school. I was either working on the house or working overtime to get money to work on the house. We were like ships passing in the night. Says, Lord, we need to be closer. Well, then I got drafted. I said, boy, you really screwed up.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I tell young people, everything you wish for too much doesn't seem to happen, because things aren't done, nor do they happen in our time. They happen in somebody else's time frame, not for us to understand.
That's right. That's the reason that it took quite a while, because after I got through at Fort Lewis, I was assigned down to Fort Bliss because of my background in mathematics and this type of thing, and I was assigned to Nike Hercules Fire Crew.
Oh boy.
And so that's where it was. It's an artillery base, basically. That's what they put the missiles under, artillery. And so coming the next summer when Lori was off, I was permanent party by this time. Had nothing to do. She came down and spent 3 months there, and it was like a honeymoon.
Oh, absolutely.
I
so
mean,
you see, there was a good upside.
That's why I
to
say
this.
the Lord knew what He was doing. I just wasn't I wasn't patient enough to understand it.
What did I just say? You
That's
just,
right. That's
just
exactly
have to
right.
wait for the miracle to happen.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
And it happened. So you had a wonderful time in Fort Bliss, Texas.
Fort Bliss, Texas, yes.
And I'm familiar with Fort Bliss from when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. We were stationed at Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo. And we used to travel down that way to El Paso.
I think the interesting thing about being so old when you're brought in like that, you don't react like you do when you're 18 or 19.
That's an interesting thought.
Because during basic, nobody messed with me. Nobody
Yes.
messed with me. They, threatened all these kids to store certain things, And so on the weekend, when they were shutting it down, they had little books in there about all kind of regs. So I'd sit there and rig the regs, So we were out on a 30-mile hike, forced march. So I'm watching my watch because I read in the regs at 2 hours and 15 minutes they had to give you a break. So we're coming along 210 minutes. I said, hey, Sarge, 2 hours and 15 minutes, we're supposed to have a break. He says, oh, we're going to march you in the ground. Shut up and get back in line. It wasn't 5 minutes. Company, halt.
So any of the young troops probably referred to you as Dad?
Just about, yeah.
Dad, Grandpa, maybe?
Grandpa, that was
Grandpa?
more, yeah.
Grandpa? So you were how long in Fort Bliss?
Well, whatever basic training was, I forget how many months it was now. I think it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks.
So you started basic at Fort Lewis. Ended up finishing the remainder of your training, which would have been after boot camp?
Yes,
Advanced training.
AIT.
Advanced infantry training, ITR, we had BIS.
Right, all
infantry,
different, yeah.
All that stuff as you start to spread out into a permanent MOS.
Right.
But everybody gets the basic training and then advanced training, and then you end up, depending on grades and qualifications.
That's right. They
areas.
look at your record and see where are your soft spots, where are you best at.
And your education.
They do a pretty good job at it, usually, I think.
They do. But you brought a lot of life's experiences, practical application in with you, which had to have been an asset.
It was. Well, I was telling you, we just bought the farm. I was working so hard. The first PT test we took, because it was kind of unique, I got drafted with 50 boys from McLaren that had the choice of either going to the state pen or into the Army.
And they were doing that during Vietnam,
Yes,
weren't they?
They were, right.
That's right.
And
You
so
had a
I was
choice.
really concerned, thinking these guys are going to be tough. Well, come to find out, they were nothing but marshmallows, because they always worked in groups or in gangs. But individually, and of course the Army or the Marines, you don't work in, they break you down so you're on your own.
Yeah. I know troops, Marines, few select cases that came home after 13 months. PTSD, not recognized then, and would be out with their girlfriend or in a private situation someplace in civilian life, because those troops were back home within 24 hours out of a combat zone. Your mindset is still in combat.
Absolutely.
And somebody would make a comment to their girlfriend or get smart-mouthed with a veteran, and the veteran would go after them, bust a chair over their head. They're immediately picked up, and it's either brig and that's where you're going to stay, or you're going back to Vietnam. They were using that as a wedge to get you back into Vietnam.
Right.
And I know several that, I won't repeat what they said, but said, I'm better off to go back because I don't like what's going on here in this country right now.
Well, you had
and they went back and got killed.
That was a sad time.
Because they didn't care anymore.
Because, you know, we had military standby at the time, but
Yes.
you had to be in uniform.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining, but you could take a lot of abuse. There's one of those baby killers, and I didn't take it personal because I was old enough that I could bounce off, but I could see why these, especially go there risking their lives and get that kind of harassment, just broke my heart even as old as I was.
This is another thing that a lot of the troops went through, and they experienced different things when they came home. I didn't experience that because we kind of stayed away from it. I did go back to Portland State, and I saw what was going on. And I decided college wasn't for me. At that point in time, at that age, 21, I just didn't want to deal with the mentality that was in college. I'm going to go out and find out what life's all about, which is pretty much what I did when I listened to the Marine Corps. And you sound like you have the same thought process, because looking back on it now, we hear, well, it was terrible, the troops were treated terrible, so now today everybody's a hero.
Yeah.
Everybody's a hero. So maybe that was the price that we all paid during that time period. Maybe the price that we paid was that they can be treated with respect now. Yeah. And if that's the case, hey, I'm willing to pay the price.
That's right, absolutely, yeah.
Because we have to support our troops. We have to support the people who are out on the front line. They're in any capacity, whether they're in combat or not. Mm-hmm. And that's what this country is going to have to do, is to unify. So I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with that. I got to Camp Smith in Hawaii. I just turned 20 years old, June 67. A couple months in hospital in Guam. Report to Camp Smith, first Monday morning. 10 of us are told that 10 of us aren't welcomed on the Marine base because we are combat troops. We don't follow orders, we're dirty, we don't start your utilities, and they no longer have any use for us. Now that is a heck of a deal to be told on a Marine base.
That's right.
That you're not welcomed. Yeah. They were even doing it within the military. Stateside there was a divide.
Right.
And that divide has seemed to have stayed since then. And it makes me feel bad for George Wright and Jim Wright.
Right, They paid the ultimate.
And they're getting recognized.
And they're finally getting
in
recognized.
2016.
That's right. I know. 50 years later,
we've lost something that we have to gain back. So you've experienced it. You have a different perspective because you went in older. You went in an older age, and you remember these things.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Little things like when I was in the Air Defense School, they're going through this thing, and you have to have a TS clearance. So you get a TS clearance because they call everybody, and they say, "Oh, this is top secret. Can't tell you, but I can go home and get the encyclopedia and tell you more from the encyclopedia than I could what they were telling me."
You can get on your cell phone.
Yeah. And
all you have to do is watch the news.
That's exactly right. But here again, and I think it has to do with trying to get you a mindset to be careful, the only thing of it, because it was just ludicrous. I couldn't believe it.
It's an amazing thing. There are no secrets anymore. We went places, and the day we got to Vietnam, C-130s flew into Dong Ha from Okinawa. And Hanoi Hannah came on our radio and said, "Welcome back to country, 3-4. We're going to get you this time." Now, where did this woman get this information? We didn't even know where we were.
Yeah. I know.
Who's passing this information around? The restaurants. And I just heard it the other day. A lot of restaurants Chinese restaurants, Vietnamese restaurants.
Yep.
There was a lot of information being passed in those recreational or comfort zones.
That reminds me of one of the funny things during basic, is that we were going through POI training, remember? Prisoner of war, POW training,
oh, yes.
POW training,
Okay.
and they're going down, what are you going to give them? And everybody, oh, my rank, neck, and first, my rank, name, and serial number, right? Well, here again, I'm old enough, and so the first sergeant comes, what are you going to give them? I said, anything they want to hear. He exploded, absolutely exploded. And for 5 minutes, he rants and raves and goes on and on. And he comes back, why'd you say that? I says, you're putting me in a position I can't tell you because I don't know until I get there. I don't think I'll give them anything but my name, rank, and serial number, but I can't guarantee you that.
The honest answer is...
See, and what we should have learned from Korea.
Yeah.
Korea was the testing point, and they broke so many people.
Oh, yeah.
And so we all have breaking points.
And you know what I find interesting? We refer to our troops in Vietnam as baby killers. The warmongers today,
Yep.
the American warmongers. And if you go down through history, and we talk about waterboarding today, that is absolute torture, it's inhuman, it's this, it's that, you can't, oh my gosh, you can't even talk to somebody harshly when you question them.
Yeah.
I could name several countries that have been very harsh. Let's talk about what Germans did. Let's talk about what the Japanese did in World War II.
Oh, that's...
Tossing babies up and catching them on their bayonets in the islands.
Yep.
And Dad told me about that. The cruelty from Chinese, Koreans, we can't touch those people when it comes to wartime cruelty.
We don't want to. We don't want to.
We can't touch
yeah.
the way we're trained, and I tell people, and I want to stress this, we're trained to preserve life.
That's right.
We are trained to preserve life. Use some judgment. The American troops are trained to preserve life. You go to the Middle East, no respect for human life whatsoever. We seem to be the only ones that have any sense of responsibility and respect for human life, yet get accused of the worst things that ever happened in history.
I think it's kind of interesting because...
It's a little boring after a while, doesn't it?
It's kind of interesting. When I was working at United at Lost and Found, I was brought into a federal investigation of a drug cartel coming out of Medellin, Colombia, and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they had all the facts, and they finally found out where this guy was. And so they arrested him and were going to put him in jail in Argentina. And he appealed to the U.S. Embassy to be transferred to America. And he had the death penalty here, but he appealed because the kind of conditions they have down there are so deplorable, he knew he would be just annihilated practically.
Absolutely.
So he appealed to the government to have him sent back up here to face his charges.
So you were how many years in the Army?
2.
2 years in the Army, active, but you did have the 6-year commitment.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Everybody, I want to make that very clear.
Yeah. I just went over it.
There was a special thing, but 2 years, 3 years, you had a 6-year commitment. Could be called me back at any time.
That's right. I just read that this morning. I went and go through it again.
Yeah.
And then I was put in a special group that all I had to do was to contact the reserves periodically because they were already full here.
And we sat on inactive reserve, but could have been called back at any time.
Yep, that's right.
But now, when you came back, you left active duty when?
October 28th of 68.
Boy, that's about the same time I got out.
Is that
You're
right?
kidding.
Uh-huh.
Did you go back to work at United Airlines?
Yes.
And how long were you there?
Well, total seniority was 30-some years.
You've got to be kidding, and I know you're not.
No.
Retired from United Airlines.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, last time I worked at the airport, 84 through 90, I had contract mechanics working on US Air, AirCal, Evergreen, 747s. I had all the aircraft maintenance for American Airlines, all the aircraft maintenance for Alaska Airlines.
Uh-huh.
In Portland, Sacramento, I had 9 airports I ran.
Oh my, huh?
We were at the airport at the same time.
Yeah.
And didn't know it.
Uh-huh.
That parallel universe.
Uh-huh. I kind of interesting. I went to an estate sale the other day, and they had a big box of cards, playing cards. I don't know why they got them, but I'll go through here. Here's a Pan Am thing. I grab that sucker, and I think I want to buy this. And so because it's just a memo, And so I'm looking through, and here's a Western one. I think I'll get that too. And I turn my head.
Western Airlines.
Western Airlines.
I had Western Airlines. Yeah.
And so I turned, and somebody already got it at that time.
Had Western before they merged with Delta.
Right. Yep.
We used to handle Air Force One when it came into the air base. We'd send a crew over for the press charter in Air Force One and had free access to Air Force One. I hate to say this, but I just had my suit and tie on, sunglasses, and I put my wallet up here so it looked like a who knows what. Secret Service at the bottom of the stairs going to the aircraft, and I walk up and go like that and go like that, and they wouldn't say, and I walk right up the stairs and walk on Air Force One. Of course, they probably knew who I was, but.
That reminds me of the Army too, because I was on permanent base down there, and you have to realize in the Army it all has to do with rank.
Yeah.
And so I was my first sergeant said, "Hey, Gene, we need some. Will you call Director of Supply and order this?" And I said, "Okay, I dial number in. This is King over at 8 Battery. We need this. We need it now. You understand?" Yes, sir. And it would work up till you get to a sergeant major. "Who is this?" he'd say.
Well, yeah.
That's what I say. It works a certain way, but it was amazing how you could bluff your way through by just.
When it comes to the sergeant major, like I've said before, most of the officers respect the sergeant major.
Absolutely.
because they've got the time and rank,
that's
time
right.
and grade.
That's right. Yep.
A sergeant major is the guy or the woman, so you must have known all of these folks, the managers from years ago at the airport. I left, I went back in '84, and Frank Face was still there.
When I transferred in May of '65, the Portland airport was a beautiful building.
Oh, fabulous.
Remember the old horseshoe, and you drive up, and there were roses all the way up and roses all the way down. There was a short-term parking down the lower level. You put a quarter in or something and go in and get your bag and this type of thing. And now it's just a cement city like everything else.
Before construction, we went through the first phase of construction at the airport. We went through the first phase of construction. And they said, this is it, there'll be no more. And, all the managers and the airport manager and the Port of Portland executives all went to meetings as they were trying to sell the bond. And one question that a fellow by the name of Terry Hunter asked, who was with Air West at that time, Hughes Air West, said, "I have one question. Is this open-ended, or when the work is done, there's no more taxes? Bond's gone." Well, it is open-ended, but we don't plan to use any more money. Once this project is completed, the expansion should suffice. To this day, as we're sitting here, they're still spending money.
That's right, absolutely.
I was there. Managers Parking used to be where you walk to the office.
Yes, right.
I was there the night D.B. Cooper took the airplane.
Right.
Oh, the history of that. But it's changed so much. We had no security.
No.
My goodness, life has changed.
No.
So you retired from United when?
Oh, my wife could tell you. That's.
Well, let's ask her. She's right. She's right there.
She keeps track of that sort of thing. To me, that's insignificant. I'm retired. I don't care when it was.
Take a guess at how many years you've been retired?
I've been retired since 98.
98. I retired in 99 from life in general, except this, because it's a great life.
Oh, I can see why.
Talking to folks, just having a ball. And so what have you done in retirement? You and your lovely wife, what have you done in retirement?
We have 43 acres out there, and so we've done some logging. And so one of my loves is gardening. I love to garden. I love flowers.
Wonderful.
In freshman in high school, my FFA project was a flower garden.
I'll be darned.
I got laughed at quite a little bit, but I've always loved them. So we grow dahlias. And so, for instance, this year we've taken out about 57 bouquets of daffodils.
Oh, boy.
I don't know how many bouquets of irises and that type of thing. But we think the Lord give us to it to give somebody else. So we take them to rest areas and neighbors and retirement homes, this type of thing for people.
It's just a big circle of life.
Yes.
Just a big circle of life. And at the age you ended up in the military and coming from the Midwest and where you are now, it's a lovely story. It's an exciting story. And for me, not sitting down and discussing anything beforehand, it makes it great for me because this is all a surprise. Your story is new to me. I didn't have any questions to ask. You had all the information, and that's what makes this great. So we have a veteran here that has one heck of a story, and
well, I have to say I really enjoyed my time in the military.
oh, I loved it. I loved it.
I have several letters, one from the Special Services Director, because I spent loads of time over in the ceramics department.
Special Services.
Yeah,
That's right.
And the guy was so impressed with me, he wrote a letter to my commanding officer saying what a great job I was doing for there. One from the Lutheran Servicemen Center saying, Gene keeps bringing these guys in all the time so we can have a good time with them. And it was just one of these things where you were able to share what you enjoy with a comrade.
Well, you lived, to use a term we hear today, you and I lived outside the box.
Yeah, well, it's
most of our lives.
It's kind of interesting because I was in permit party, and they come out, hey, we need a volunteer for 2 months. And I said, what's the volunteer? Because I volunteer, but I'm real careful about what it is. Well, we have this recreational center out in the desert here, and it has 10 in-ground trampolines and 4 baseball diamonds and a house and everything else. But the high schoolers are vandalizing at night, so we need somebody to live in that house and just go out and harass them a little bit if they show up. I said, okay, I'll do that. So for 3 months one summer, I was out in this house. And it was lovely. I enjoyed it because the bus come up and drop me off, and I'd walk across the desert and get there. But it was just a lovely place to be, so quiet and nice. It was, except in January. I was walking back. I had to spend another week in January. I was walking back to the bus, and I go across this log and realize when I'm halfway across it was a diamondback. But it was so cold he couldn't move. It was so cold, they're cold-blooded, so if it gets cold, they just don't move. And so he just lay there. So I picked up my step a little bit, and away I went.
Diamondback, yes. I got a quick one. Valparaiso, Indiana, we're on our bicycles. We're down in a dried-up creek. It's kind of muddy, and we see what appeared to be 3 sticks laying in the mud. We got a limb, and we touched them, and they moved. And so we picked them all up and put them in a bucket, hung it on the handlebar of the bicycle, and we took them out in the street and let them go in the street, and we were playing with them. I thought they were big worms. They were water moccasins.
Small ones.
We didn't know.
Yep.
How did I not get bit?
Well, kind of interesting. The moccasin, though, it doesn't have fangs. It has those teeth. They just grade over to get the...
And of course, unlike the diamondback,
right.
they don't make noise. This has been wonderful, Gene. I have a great deal of respect for you. Interesting story, and all those things that you and I have in common, and that we do have in common with a lot of other people out there. But we're going to go away now. We've had a wonderful time, and until next time, right now I want to thank Gene.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. God bless.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And
bless you as well.
And I know we're going to meet again.
Okay.
So until next time, you have a safe journey wherever life leads. Thank you.